Hello, and welcome to I Want to Talk About, the show where I talk about whatever I feel like. My name is Andrew, and today I want to talk about possibly my new favorite movie, like ever. I Saw the TV Glow. Now, this movie is incredibly dense. It is the metaphor-heavy bullshit that I love. And so to help me out trying to dissect this film, I am joined by an extra special guest, longtime oomph, and the person who put this movie on my map in the first place. Everybody give it up for B!
Hi.
How are you doing, B?
I'm good. I'm very happy to be here. I love talking about this fucking movie.
It's so good. I saw it the second time I saw it with one of my friends, and I was like, okay, well, I'm gonna go home now. But we walked to my car together, and then we sat there and talked for like an hour, like on the hood of my car. Like, God, this movie's so good. But before we get into all that, we are recording this tens of minutes after the trailer for the new Dimension 20 season, Never Stop Blowing Up, got released. Do you have any initial thoughts?
I'm very, very excited for it. I did predict like a couple weeks ago that it was going to be a Kids on Bikes hack again, because when they're not doing D&D, they're always doing fucking Kids on Bikes. And I love Kids on Bikes, but there are other games that you can play. But I do think that the exploding dice for an action movie season is very cute.
It's really cool.
The cast is great.
God. Reka, back on our TVs. Everybody cheered.
We're so fucking back.
You mentioned other tabletop roleplay systems, because you have a podcast about tabletop RPGs. Am I correct, or am I thinking of someone else?
Yeah, no, that is me. I have a podcast called Tabletop Book Club, where we read a new game every month. Yeah, it's like I don't even know what I would want instead for this season, because also the season hasn't started yet. Right. So like I don't know if Kids on Bikes is or isn't going to work. But I saw someone, who was it? Miles Rabdoidal. I've never said its username out loud, so I'm just gonna hope and pray that I said it in a normal way.
Right.
It said that if the season was a horror season, because it seemed like it might have been a horror season before the trailer came out, that Call of Cthulhu could have worked really well.
Yeah.
Even though, it's Lovecraft and, obviously.
Right.
Boo.
Yeah. Boo! Although, hey, we also don't love this property, but I love Lovecraft Country. I think it does a great job of deconstructing that, the history behind that kind of horror.
I've been meaning to watch it, and then I just never have.
It's great. I love the book, too. I own the book. It's not here. It's at my parents' house, but it's fabulous. I am really excited going back to the season. I'm so excited that it's like, I wasn't expecting Jumanji, but
this. Yeah.
Right? Like
I was expecting it to just be like sets, and not like them actually being in movies, but I think that that's really, really fun.
Yeah.
I think it's more interesting that way, because I think if it was just like we're stunt people on sets, it'd be like, okay, then what are you doing?
Or if
like,
it was,
why is this a season?
Or if it was just like set in an action movie world, like that would be fun, I guess. But
it'd be fun for like 2 episodes.
Yeah. That would be one of those like Dungeons and Drag Queens, like 4-episode season is good.
Exactly.
But I'm really excited for this one. Oh, I wanted to ask you about this, because I know you are also a big fan of this. I've been getting back into anime since junior year finished, and I wanted to ask you about Madoka, because I know we both love it.
We both love it.
And it's at Pride Month. Lesbians.
Shout out to lesbians.
Shows chocked full of them.
This.
Yeah.
Madoka Magica was one of my, like, first anime. In, like, one of my friends in, like, 5th grade was like, you have to watch this, there's lesbians. And I was like, okay. And then I remember watching it, but I don't remember digesting it.
Yeah.
I think I was just like, that was cool. I like the animation, but I don't think that I, like, processed it. And then I rewatched it when I was, like, 14, and it changed my life.
Yeah.
It rewired my brain.
That's real. See, that's me with Evangelion. That's my fave. No, but you picked a very good anime to start with. One of my first animes, I was thinking about it because it is like a magical girl anime. Tokyo Mew Mew. I don't know if you know what that is.
I am, like, loosely familiar because my journey with anime manga is, like, I watched Oron was my first anime, which is crazy because I was in, like, 2nd grade, and so I watched that, and then I started reading a lot of manga that I would just, like, get from the library in batches. And Tokyo Mew Mew was one that I always saw, but I was like, oh no.
No, yeah. My friend in elementary school really liked it, and so she got me on it. And it's this weird, for those who have no idea what the fuck I'm talking about. I
forgot that this was recorded.
It's this weird it's a magical girl anime where they work in a maid cafe as middle schoolers, so like 14 years old-ish, I think. But when they turn into magical girls, they turn into cat maids that are themed around different fruits. I remember the main girl was a strawberry. I think there was a blue one, and a green one that was maybe a lime, and it's like a pastry cafe. So all the moves were like dessert themed. I don't know. As like a 10-year-old, it was really fun. I don't know how well it holds up though.
Probably not very well if it's 14-year-olds.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
It shoujo anime loves to have their protagonists be like 13, 14, and then, like, when I was first watching, like, my starter animes, so like Oron and Fruits Basket and Madoka, I was like, oh, these are like grown women and they're getting into these situations. And then I would rewatch and be like, oh my god, I'm older. I'm older than the protagonist now, and that's crazy.
Right? It's that thing where, like, media made for children, even if the characters are still children, if they're like high schoolers, if your target demo is 10 to 12-year-olds, those are like the older peers, so you can get away with a lot more versus, like, I think if some of those shoujo animes were maybe not intended for children and written the way that they are, it would be like way more of an issue. But yeah. That's one of the things I really like about Evangelion is it's not that it's shoujo, but it takes that, like, oh, you thought being a child soldier would be cute? No.
You thought it was going to be a good time?
No. They're all traumatized. Bad. Anyway, we'll stop talking about anime for now. Oh my god. Actually, no. We're gonna hold on, because I just finished season 2 Jujutsu Kaisen, and I wanna rant about this a little bit because, and I started reading the manga too. Jujutsu Kaisen has a fridging problem bad.
I've heard.
In spoilers for season 2 of the anime, but there's a character that is set up as, like, narratively the perfect person to team up with the main character against the like one of the major enemies of the arc, and she just gets murdered by him. And why does she get
Oh,
murdered
cool.
by him? So that the main character can get really mad and do like a power up basically, and then team up with a different male character that shows up out of nowhere. And then in the manga, spoilers for volume 17, one of the characters has a twin, and we know about the twin. We don't really see her that often. She's like off in the background, basically like tragic backstory fodder, more or less. And she shows up in the manga only to immediately get like lethally wounded to use as leverage. And then when both of the twins are dying, she sacrifices her life to save the main character. And it's like, we knew nothing about this character. She had no personality. And then you introduce her just to die tragically. It really annoys me, and I don't know whether or not I want to keep reading this.
Absolutely fair.
I just had to get that off my chest. It's been boiling for a couple of days now. But let's move on into the main topic of this video, which is, of course, I saw the TV glow. I want to start the conversation by asking, basically, how would you categorize this movie? It's very weird. It's like, I think the closest genre to anything is horror, but even then, it's not really like scary.
Yeah, I think that I don't know if you've seen Sean Brunn's other movie. We're All Going to the World's Fair.
I have not.
It's very good. I would recommend. But they're very good at doing horror in just a psychological way, if that makes sense. Yeah, I would. If I had to put it into a genre, I would put TV Glow in the horror genre, but I think that it's like a way oversimplification.
Yeah, because, you know, like you said, it's psychological horror, but in like, I feel like the term psychological horror is used when there's no jump scares in something, and this is psychological horror in the way that it uses like your psychology to make you feel uncomfortable.
Yeah, it's a deeply uncomfortable movie. It like makes you feel sick. And I love it.
So good. Oh my
and
god.
It's so good. Yeah, I've been asked by multiple people like, "Oh, can I see this if I'm like bad with horror and bad with gore?" It's like, yes, but like you're not gonna. I think that if you're bad with horror, you're probably not gonna have like a perfectly good time. No one's gonna have a perfectly good time. It's a sad movie,
right?
It's sort of deeply upsetting, but
it's kind of like the whole thing with it.
Yeah.
But no, that is true. Like, if you're like bad with jump scares or something, like my journey to horror was through creepypasta, and it was sort of the eventual like build up of like immersion, but I think there has to be a fundamental like enjoyment of feeling bad.
Yeah, for sure. Well, that's sort of the thing with horror in general,
right?
Like outside of just this movie, it's like you have to. I went to a panel at PAX Unplugged last year that was talking about horror and tabletop games. And one of the speakers talked about how there's type 1 fun where you're having a good time during and after, which is, you know, just like a comedy movie or something. Type 2 fun where you're having a bad time during but a good time after, like a roller coaster. And type 3 fun where you're having a bad time during and a bad time after.
Yeah,
and
no,
I think
that is definitely this movie.
Yeah.
And it's just like I mentioned at the top, it is so heavy with metaphor, and we're gonna try and keep most of that like conversation until later. I want to try and keep the first half of this episode sort of spoiler light. But we're gonna talk about some specifics at the very least. So if you want to see this movie, having absolutely no information going in, stop the video right now. Go find the nearest place it's
Find
playing.
one of the 400 theaters it's playing
Yeah.
in.
I was lucky enough to have it be playing at the theater that I work at, so I got to see it 3 times for free. But or just wait until it gets released on digital in a couple of weeks, probably.
Yeah.
But so yes, if you want to know nothing going in, stop right now. Now my next question is how much information do you think people should or need to go into this movie having? Because for me personally, the only thing I knew about it was that I had seen a trailer for it and it looked sort of weird, and that it was like a trans metaphor at the center of it. Those are the only 2 like pieces of context I had. I'm wondering, did you have a similar experience? Do you think that someone should go in with more context?
I had pretty much a similar experience. I was like looking forward to this movie because I had seen We're All Going to the World's Fair, so I was sort of following Jean-Brun's work. And it got announced to like be at Sundance, I think was the festival. And I was like, whoa, this cast is kind of crazy. But it's like I didn't know much about it going into it because I kept seeing reviews from like cis reviewers where they were like, this movie is weird and too full of metaphor, and it like it's very like indulgent in all the songs that it has. So I was this is getting a little too into specifics, but while I was watching it, I was like, okay, so there's gonna be like full performances of all of the songs, and then it passed. I didn't even realize that all of the songs had played.
Right.
I think that, yeah, I don't know, the way that people who weren't deeply affected by this movie talk about this movie is weird.
Yeah. Yeah.
It like, not even that like cis people talk about it in a weird way, which like, yes, but there are like some people who at least get what's going on. But like I keep seeing people be like, oh, it's about nostalgia. It's like, well, kind of.
I mean, yeah.
But not really.
There are elements of nostalgia in there, but it is ultimately used to further the trans narrative.
It's deeply, deeply transgender, and you have to understand that. I think that people can go into this with the only context being that it's going to be sort of like weird and dreamy, because I think that if you're expecting like a straight up horror movie and you're like, and you go into it just thinking that's going to be horror, you're going to be like, I don't know what this is.
If you're expecting tarot and you get I Saw the TV Glow, that would be a jarring experience. Have you seen tarot?
I haven't seen tarot. I keep getting YouTube ads for it.
It's bad, but like so fun. I again saw it for free, so that may have colored my experience a little bit, but I had a blast watching it. And the only thing I really went into that movie for was the creature design. And oh boy, is the creature design in that movie really, really good. I think another thing we'll talk about with this movie, I think the movie's use of effects and the way it uses intentionally has like the disconnect between what is supposed to be in universe media and what isn't, and then they set that up at the beginning so that they can play with it like towards the middle and the end of the movie.
And it's so good.
It's so good.
When I I saw it at a screening that was a double feature of Poltergeist, but I did not stay for Poltergeist. But there was a Q&A with Jane Schoenbrunn after TV Glow, and they said that it's filmed on I think 35 millimeter, and then 35 millimeter was what's the word I'm looking for, put through VHS and beta, which is like a form of VHS, but it looks a little bit different. And then they were like layering the different shots, or the different like video. I'm so bad at words, it's fine. Layering it over each other to create like a more dreamy effect, and it's so cool.
That's awesome. Yeah, because it usually I'm not a person that notices like the type of film, or like you know, there are other things that I'm more sensitive to when it comes to like my analytical brain, and I think a mark of an incredibly talented artist is when they can make you notice stuff that you otherwise wouldn't. And this movie is full of that. You know, you could argue that it's maybe a little heavy-handed, but I would argue maybe not heavy-handed enough, since some people apparently watched this full movie and didn't understand the trans narrative. You know.
At the Q&A, the director talked about how they did a radio interview with Justice Smith like earlier in that day, and the host was like, they said that it was a trans movie, and the host was like, well, you're trans, but Owen is just a troubled young man. It's like, oh, you don't get it at all.
Troubled by what? Troubled by what? What is he troubled by?
By dysphoria, or like
we talked a little bit about nostalgia, and how that is like the, you know, it is an element, but it's not like, I wouldn't argue that it's the central one. And this movie is very clearly inspired by, I think, mainly Buffy, but there's also a lot of X-Files and Twin Peaks, like that kind of like 90s supernatural drama. Have you seen any of those shows? Have you like watched Buffy or etc.?
Not in full. I've seen like a little bit of X-Files and a little bit of Buffy. But you know, I've watched stuff that is hugely influenced by those things. Like I've seen all of Supernatural, which is a Monster of the Week show, heavily influenced by Buffy. Yeah, it's even like I sort of understand the visual language of those 90s Monster of the Week shows, even though I haven't like really delved into them. But it's so clearly Buffy,
right?
And I love it.
It's
like,
literally
it's
the
really
same
good.
font, like
it's the same
credits.
font. One of the characters in the Pink Opaque is named Tara.
The actress who plays Tara in Buffy makes a cameo, and it's very jarring. I was like, oh my god, it's Tara. What is she doing here?
I didn't realize until after, because I was looking at the cast and I was like, holy shit, Fred Durst was in this.
That was my reaction too. His name popped
really
up and
fucking
I said,
crazy.
Fred Durst? Fred Durst is the dad, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah. And he's fucking crazy.
So good.
Like really, really incredible. I saw someone on Twitter saying that they expected Fred Durst to be played for laughs, which I think would have been crazy in this. It would have been crazy for any of the cameos to be like played for laughs. But he like, his performance was sort of crazy insane. It was really good.
Yeah. Going back to Buffy. I am a huge Buffy fan. Actually, hold on. Give me 1 second.
Sure.
For those of you listening, I am currently getting out of my chair and going to grab something.
It's you and me, listeners. How are you today? Oh, Andrew's back.
I have now brought into frame my box set copy of season 2 of Buffy the Vampire Slayer. I have seasons 1 through 4. None after that. I don't think I really want to get seasons 6 and 7 because they're bad. What? Who said? Oh my god, who said that? But I do want to get 5 at some point. Anyway, I just want an excuse to show off the cool thing that I own.
Yeah, fair.
But yeah, I love Buffy, and something that I thought was really cool about this movie, especially on the second time watching it, was how much it feels like you've randomly caught the season premiere of one of these Monster of the Week shows fully out of context, and you're like sort of getting lore because, you know, they know people are tuning in for the first time, so they want to drop stuff in, but you know, they can't like run through the basics. They have to like, you know, think of the returning viewers in mind. And, you know, I think that's something that's an experience that's really lost in like modern streaming, like the way TV is released now, right? I feel like unless you watch cable television, you don't actually stumble on like you don't randomly stumble on weird TV shows that, you know, for one reason or another, you know, you have no context, you don't know what is happening, but it like truly affects you. And
yeah,
I think it's really cool that this movie captures that. Also, we mentioned the music. The soundtrack of this movie is so good.
it's so good.
And I'm an album listener. I like to start an album at the top and then just let it play. And this album is so well put together. It's the perfect kind of soundtrack where there are like ebbs and flows, and they're like different genres, quote unquote, of music, but they're all similar enough, and they all
It's very cohesive,
gel together.
Yeah.
Before we get into like super spoiler heavy country where we're gonna like start talking about like plot, I wanted to talk about Bridget Lundy Payne's performance for a minute, because I think they deserve every award in the universe for it. It's so good.
EGOT, Pulitzer Prize.
Yeah.
Now.
Exactly.
Like
Nobel Peace Prize to Bridget Lundy Payne for the scene where Maddie is watching the Pink Opaque, and then you can just like see the breakdown happen. It's, oh my god, it's excellent. Also, another I think they play a moody teen. Both Lundy Payne and Justice Smith play the like moody teenage like awkwardness so well. There at one point Maddie goes, "Damn, that absolutely sucks." And every time I saw the movie, I laughed out loud at that line, and I also laughed at a little later in the movie, Maddie said, when asked if she still talked to a side character, Maddie says, "I haven't talked to that asshole in a year. She told everyone I tried to touch her tit, which isn't even true. And then all of a sudden, 11th grade comes around, and it's her lifelong dream to join the cheer squad." Ugh. That also made me laugh in the theater each time.
Their performance in general is so crazy good, but their performance as like, I think it's just like 9th grade Maddie, like 9th and 10th grade Maddie, is so funny. Like I felt like I was laughing too much through the beginning, because I was like, this doesn't feel like a movie that I should be laughing during, but it's really funny.
Right? It's like they're in this like dimly lit room with all these upside down tables, and you can hear the like fluorescent humming, and it makes you like feel awful, and then all of a sudden they say something so real, like I've certainly said that exact same thing in that same way at one point in my life, that you can't help but laugh out loud because it's so accurate.
Like so incredibly real. The oh, is that the pink opaque? Yeah, do you watch? No. And then they go back to the book. It kills.
It's so real.
It's
so because like,
perfect.
oh, you don't watch it? Okay, well then we can't talk about it because you don't know.
Yeah, it's like I have no reason to talk to you. I'm gonna go back to reading.
Yeah. And then Owen goes to sit over by the pink vending machine. Pink, aka
Pink.
trans. Anyway. That's actually going to lead us into our spoiler heavy conversation. So if you still want to see the movie but wanted to hear us talk about it a little more, but don't want any actual plot points revealed, now would be the time to stop watching.
Find one of the 400 theaters.
Exactly.
Go now. It's urgent.
Pay someone on Facebook Marketplace to set up a camera and film it for you.
This.
Sorry,
before we get into it,
yeah.
One of my friends who lives in Australia asked me if they should see it, and I was like, yeah, but I think it's only playing in the US right now. And I was going to jokingly offer to like FaceTime them while I go see it, and then it reminded me of Maddie recording the Pink Opaque for Owen. I got hit with such a weird feeling that I abandoned the message.
Yeah, that's
I was
so
like,
funny.
I just can't get into it right now.
This is, oh my god. You'll understand it later. No, that's so real. We were talking about trans stuff, and I said that at least the color, this movie isn't subtle in the way that it uses color.
Literally not at all.
It's like the first two scenes. Scene number one, or well, actually, technically it's scene number two because it opens on a shot of the ice cream truck, but I'm just gonna ignore that. The first like scene, we see Owen flipping through the TV, like flipping through channels, and the light from the TV is blue at first, and then he's flipping through it, and then when it gets to the pink opaque, it turns pink, blue to pink, one of many such cases where that's gonna happen, and then he like lights up, he smiles, and it's incredibly obvious. And then the next scene after that is the parachute scene that you've probably seen screen grabs of, which, it's literally just the trans flag colors.
Yeah, as soon as child Owen was walking under the parachute and it's all like pink, purple, blue, white, I was like, oh, okay. Yeah. Like it's heavy-handed and I am obsessed with it.
Right. It's, and that's something that I love about this movie is that it's heavy-handed, but the economy of information is so effective, right? It's not heavy-handed in the way where, the script is like, wow, sometimes I really wish I was a girl, but I'm a boy.
I wish there was something I could do about that.
Right? It's, I think it's to the credit of the director, having this, being able to have like a singular vision at the center of both the writing and the directing and the audio and like everything allows the story to be more evenly spread across those mediums and like more effective, I think.
Yeah.
There's another moment, the relationship with Owen's mom is something that, especially the second time watching, I really connected with and appreciated how well they develop it in so little time, right? And going back to my point about like economy of information, there after the initial 2-year time skip, the first shot we see of the mom, who till this point has had large, like curly hair that's like big and bouncy, and then we see her in a headscarf, looking like really tired, and maybe it's just me, but immediately I clocked that as, oh, she has cancer. Like,
Yeah.
and they never say that. She mentions her little health scare, but it never gets more specific than that. I believe Owen says that she passes away, but he doesn't mention specifically what.
Yeah.
So, it's very heavy-handed in the way it's shown to us, but it's shown rather than being told, so it feels less obvious.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Do you have any other? Because I basically just wrote down a list of all of the things where I was like, that's transgender, and I could go through all of that. But are there any moments that really stick out in your memory as like, this is, other than the ones we already talked about, right?
Yeah. I'm sure that we'll talk about this more because it is bonkers insane and like, the crux of the whole movie.
Right.
But the the single shot in the middle of another scene, I don't remember what the scene is. It's been like over a month since I saw it. But it's the single shot of Owen in the bathroom and the door is cracked and you just see like their body wearing the dress. I felt like I had been punched in the stomach.
No, because and I'll tell you what, that scene happens in the middle of the reveal. It's after the first performance when Maddie is explaining like, the Shyamalan-esque twist of the plot, and then it's something like, do you ever remember feeling like it wasn't just a TV show? And then I think it cuts to that scene where it's it's exactly what you described. It's
literally just like a second.
Right.
It's so brief, and then it comes back in a later scene, but
right. And
it's so effective. It's crazy.
it creates that, like, I think a lot of this movie is about like not wanting to like confront yourself.
Mm-hmm.
It's a really standout shot because it captures it captures that theme, where it's a visual way of showing how Owen's mind travels, instinctually remembers the like gender related, the gender euphoria that he experienced. I don't know. Mm-hmm. It's gonna be weird using pronouns for these characters, especially Owen, since I'm gonna stick to using he for Owen, just because I think that'll be easier. But just going forward, I think I just want to make that clear that I'm not trying to like misgender this character.
Yeah.
No, but then, his mind immediately flashes back to that gender euphoria of putting on the dress, looking, smiling, and then, it's too much. He doesn't want to confront that, so it, like, almost immediately shifts back, and it, whenever, if you've experienced that kind of dysphoria, or just, like, that kind of anxiety in general, I think, it's something very relatable and deeply effective.
Mm-hmm.
I also think there's a great moment. Oh gosh, there's a scene in the opening of The Pink Opaque, where Isabel is holding an axe and walking down the football field, and we see that same shot repeated, but it's Owen instead. And they're wearing, it's the same dress from the TV show that's in that. And so I think that's another moment that really stands out to me of, oh, they're like really trying to tell us something about gender here specifically. I feel like we've gone really far in and we haven't actually like talked about the setup for the plot.
Sure.
We just sort of, because I realized, I was like, oh, they do it's the shot from the opening of The Pink Opaque, and if you have never seen this movie, you probably don't even know what The Pink Opaque is.
Yeah.
So in uh basically, as like an elevator pitch to the story, it follows this kid Owen, and he's very lonely. He has a abusive question mark father, at least very cold and emotionally distant, and a loving mother, and he catches this show called The Pink Opaque, which is basically Buffy the Vampire Slayer, but there are two main characters. One's named Isabel and one is named Tara, the femme and the butch respectively. And the and those characters in the show are connected by some sort of like psychic link, and they form the Pink Opaque. And then in the real world, quote unquote, we have Owen, and he sees ads for it, but it's on past his bedtime. He's not allowed to watch it. And then he makes friends with Maddie, who is 2 years older than him, goes to the same school. And she watches The Pink Opaque every Saturday night. And then she invites him over to watch it together, and he lies to his parents to go over there, and then they start watching The Pink Opaque together. And that's sort of the setup. The plot, evolves as it goes along, as all things do, but I think that's like the main context that we need.
Yeah.
So we've been talking about interpretation and analysis a lot, and specifically with cis reviewers, you mentioned not getting this movie. And I didn't feel like reading any of those reviews because I didn't want to bum myself out, but I did scan some of them. And it is very much like there's this idea that all interpretation of art is valid. And I think there is some truth to that. However, no, it's not. You can be wrong about what something means pretty categorically. You did interpret it that way, I'll give you that. But I think any reviewer discussion that talks about this movie and doesn't talk about the transness at the center is first and foremost just lazy.
Yeah.
Right? I don't know. What are your thoughts on this?
It's like, I think that obviously some people are not like qualified to speak on it, because like I think if I read a cis reviewer's review and the whole thing was like, I'm gonna talk about how deeply transgender this movie is, it's like, okay, well,
right,
you don't really get it even if you get it. But it's crazy the amount of reviews that I also haven't read many deeply because I love myself. But it's crazy the amount that I've like skimmed where it's either people being like, I don't like it and therefore I'm not acknowledging the transgender nature, or I like it because I think it's about nostalgia and fandom.
Right.
And I'm not acknowledging the deep transgenderism of it all. And like it is sort of about nostalgia, but it's not like pro nostalgia.
Right. And it's also not anti nostalgia. Right?
No.
There's
just
this
acknowledging
idea,
that's a thing.
Yeah, there's this idea that we'll talk about the ending more because I have a lot to say about the ending, but there's this idea that the ending, or that the movie is supposed to be like, oh, danger about being trapped in nostalgia and like how it like seeps away your life. And it's like, did you watch the movie? Because that's not really like what's happening. Like, I don't even know how better to explain what my problem with that, other than you simply need to watch the movie with your eyes open
It's like they fell asleep and they
Yeah.
were like, fuck, I have to say something.
Or every time the color pink came on screen, they just like blacked out and then came
Yeah.
to after. Oh my gosh. But
It-
yeah,
yeah.
I was gonna say
Sorry, go ahead.
you have a very valid point where I don't think I actually want cis reviewers to have the conversations we're gonna have in a little bit about like the way this movie ends and how that relates to transness. But I do think what really annoys me is when they're like, it's actually not about trans people, or they try to defend themselves from like not reading it that way, and it's like, I would have respected it more if you had just not mentioned it, but the fact that you're
Yeah.
mentioning it only to like say
Be loud
that's
and
actually not what
wrong.
I think, that
Yeah.
feels bad.
Yeah.
Since we're talking about interpretation, let's talk about the way this movie ends.
Yes.
And before we talk about the ending, I'm sure you are familiar with this concept, but to the viewers for the viewers and listeners at home who maybe aren't as academically minded as us, I want to introduce the concept of Watsonian versus Doyleist media analysis. Those terms come from Sherlock Holmes, Watsonian being, related to the character Watson, and Doyleist being related to Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, the person who wrote Sherlock Holmes. So, in that same vein, Watsonian, analysis or, thought has to do with in-universe, like, justifications and plot points, right? This thing happens because of this cause, right? It's like A, B, C, D, basically. Doyleist thought or analysis, I don't know if there's like a proper term for it. I'm just kind of talking out of my ass here. But you take a step back and look at the piece of art from like a meta perspective. It's not about why does this happen in the plot, it's why does this happen in the story, what is it supposed to tell us, does it like work, or is it like effective, it's sort of that thing. Do you have anything you want to add to that explanation?
Yeah, it's funny that you say that people watching might not be as academically minded as us, because I'm super not. But though I keep seeing people be like, the ending is grim, the ending is sad,
Right.
Just because it has Owen cutting themselves open,
right.
But it literally ends by saying there's still time.
Right.
Like,
That's one of the final messages we're left with on screen is there's still time.
Which is the most like, not to say spoon feeding, because I feel like that has a negative connotation, but it is very like, you can get on hormones at any point in your life.
Right.
And people are like, oh, it's sad.
While you are still
like,
drawing breath,
about?
there is always time to live as your true self.
Exactly.
That's the way I interpret this ending, at least.
Yeah.
But let's take a step back. Because again, some people watching may not have watched this movie, because it's not playing a lot of places. So basically, towards the middle of the movie, Maddie, the character that Owen is friends with, disappears. She wants to run away together, but then he basically rats himself out to get out of having to make that decision.
Which makes me insane.
Yeah, very, very,
it's so much.
Is so, he's like having a panic attack as he rings the doorbell of this house that he's said he's going to. and tells the mother of his classmate, like, you need to tell my parents that I've been lying to them because I can't bring myself to leave with her. Like,
Yeah, the thing that they say is, please don't let me go with her.
yeah,
I might be misquoting a little bit, but
it's definitely something along those lines. It's very,
yeah.
it's this like, it's something that happens a lot in the movie, this like pleading cry for help that, you know, doesn't always fall on receptive ears. Um, but so then Maddie disappears, and then we jump to, I think, 8 years later, when all of a sudden, or Owen's working in a movie theater now. He looks in on someone getting a blowjob, which is a very funny and really, it's a really funny and real scene where he like is on the phone and opens the door to the office and then like immediately shuts it and just like goes,
Yeah.
sorry, and then like walks away. I laughed when that happened.
Yeah. So, not to derail immediately, but the scene directly after where his coworker is like, do you want me to put in a good word for you? Because she
Yeah.
really likes you a lot. It's so it's so incredibly like getting bullied for being autistic.
Yeah.
Like the sort of like, it's not exactly this because I would not call this character like a mean girl for a variety of reasons, mostly because he's so fucking stupid.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's the very like, you know, like mean girl having like an autistic person as a pet, basically. Like it's very demeaning.
Yeah.
You
know, I here's the thing. I'm not autistic, I don't think. Probably not. I do have ADHD, and I know there's a lot of overlap in those two diagnoses. So I am sort of I'm pretty predisposed to like seeing the way like neurotypical people interact with autistic people, like not from the neurotypical lens. And that is another element of this movie that I think gets lost on a lot of people, is that the way that Owen interacts with the world and the way people interact with him is very, very like coded to be autistic. I think. Yeah,
I also feel this way. Like, do you like boys? I think I just like TV shows.
Yeah,
is like, it's very like denying your own feelings, first of all, but it is very much like a the way that some autistic people process sexuality and gender by being like, well, I don't know, but I think that I like this thing.
Right.
Like,
yeah. And also, there's a lot of... Part of the reason that I think people might not like this movie is because it's very slow, and there's a lot of empty space in it. And I think... Obviously, you can tell, having had, like, an hour-long conversation with me at this point, I take a lot of pauses when I speak. I like to let things land and breathe, and I need time to collect my thoughts to make sure I'm saying what I want to say. And I think that is something that I personally found very relatable with this movie, was the way the characters are performed is very natural. They have like pauses in conversation where they're both like, well, I don't really know what to talk about. And they just kind of sit there. I don't know. I think that's another part of this movie that I really want to highlight.
All of the like speaking is very natural, even in the like monologue straight to camera that Owen does sometimes, except for in the planetarium where Maddie is doing the monologue, and it's perfect. Like, it shouldn't be natural because it's like it's like weird TV show bullshit, info dump bullshit, said lovingly, info dumping And
we
it's
love
perfect.
we love bullshit. We love genre specific bullshit on this channel.
Exactly.
Um. Oh gosh,
Sorry, I do not remember what we were talking about
where
before
we
I
were.
derailed.
We were in the middle of the plot. Owen.
Right.
Yes. Okay. We were talking about Owen's working at the movie
blowjob.
theater, and then all of a sudden, Owen's at the grocery store, and he sees Maddie. She's back. Wearing a surprisingly familiar outfit. In case you didn't catch that. And she's also holding a raw piece of meat that's like bleeding onto the floor.
I forgot about that.
And they also, this is a weird thing that I noticed on the second watch that really stuck out to me. There's 3 American flags very heavily placed in the shot. Like, you're supposed to see them. And
yeah.
It's like, what? Part of it is like, why would any grocery store have 3 ginormous American flags in the produce section, first of all?
Yeah, hanging low enough where it could basically touch your head.
Right.
Like,
and so I don't really know what that's all about. It probably has something to do with like, heteronormativity, cisnormativity, American culture, et cetera, the suburbs, something. But Maddie shows up and she's like, oh, we can't talk here, but I know a place. It's this, she doesn't say this, but it's the queer bar on the outskirts of town. And
Phoebe Bridgers is there.
Right. Phoebe Bridgers is there, and it's really jarring. There's a performance.
It was the most like a jump scare. Well,
Yeah.
there are like a couple like jump scares in the movie, but the thing that got me the most was Phoebe Bridgers coming on screen because I was like, whoa.
Phoebe Bridgers coming on screen, Fred Durst's name in the credits.
Yes.
The
Emma Stone's name in the credits.
The cameo for the actress who plays Tara in Buffy. Those are the biggest jump scares you have to worry about. And then while they're there, there's a musical performance happening. It's very slow and sort of like melancholy and sad. Basically the kind of the tone that the movie has been up until this point. There's been some like spooky moments, right? There are a couple of jump scares, I guess, but up until this point in the movie, I would categorize it as a very sad story, more than a like upsetting, like viscerally upsetting story.
Yeah.
And then it's revealed that in the finale episode, or in the season 5 finale of The Pink Opaque, which is the last episode of the series, Tara and Isabel have their hearts cut out of their chest and drink the Luna juice and are basically put in a coma in the Midnight Realm. And the world that we have assumed is real life is actually the Midnight Realm. Owen is Isabel, Maddie is Tara, and Isabel is currently buried alive, slowly suffocating to death as years pass in the Midnight Realm, like seconds pass in the real world. Crazy. Did you see this coming? Were you like, oh, I see what we're doing here?
I had assumed, solely based on like resemblance between the Pink Opaque characters and the main characters of TV Glow, I was like, there's probably gonna be like at least incredibly strong parallels.
Right?
I did not see coming that they were gonna have their hearts cut out of their chests and be put into a medical coma.
Right. That is the thing. This is like, I think, a really good twist where you can obviously tell that there's supposed to be parallels between Owen and Maddie and Isabel and Tara, but I certainly didn't see coming that they were literally going to be the same people.
Yeah.
And this we're gonna pause here in the sort of plot roundup, and because I want to ask you, when you first saw this movie, did you take that at face value immediately? Were you like, Maddie's telling the truth, or were you more on Owen's side of like, maybe there's something else, there must be something else going on here, like this can't be real?
I think that I immediately bought it as the truth to some degree. I believe that it was Maddie's truth. I didn't think that Maddie was like lying.
Right.
But I think I was like, well, that can't be what's literally happening.
Right.
Which it kind of is.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
again, it's one of those things where it's never like explicitly stated, but I think it's intentionally supposed to be the truth.
Yeah.
Because the reason I asked that question is, for me personally, I immediately bought in to that as the reality. I think the reason I did that, I talked about the way the movie plays with visuals and effects, and that really comes into play after this reveal, because, you know, and especially going back, watching it a second time. Did you only see it once, or have you seen it twice?
I've only seen it once.
So, a fun fact, in case you didn't notice, at the beginning, that first shot where it's a slow zoom on the ice cream truck, we see a bunch of like squiggly sidewalk chalk art, which is in the Ice Cream Man episode of the Pinko Pig that they watch. The two like teenage guys are sitting in front of it, so it exists. And that first shot is in like the wide aspect ratio, whereas the show is filmed in like, what is it, 4:3, I think is
whatever the like old TV.
Yeah, old TV basically. Yeah. And there are other examples of that, especially, you know, we see the same sidewalk chalk art in front of the house that Owen is supposedly having sleepovers at. We see it we see it a lot in what is supposed to be the real world as well as the fictional world. There's also shots where scenes from the TV show are inexplicably in the wide aspect ratio, or scenes from the real world are in the VHS filter. That scene with Owen in the dress in the mirror is initially shown to us in the TV aspect ratio and then repeated in the wide aspect ratio. So, especially going back the second time and knowing about that reveal, I saw it more, but I do think I sort of picked up on that. There's also I forgot my favorite example of this is the Ice Cream Man looks way too good to be a Buffy period accurate SFX.
That's the thing with the initial Ice Cream Man. First of all, that did get me. I was like, whoa. But man, let's just move on. Sorry.
I'll say there is, you know, talking about nostalgia, a lot of people use that specific dichotomy between how good the Ice Cream Man effect looks at the beginning of the movie when the show is first airing versus at the end when it's on streaming as this sort of like, oh, you know, rose-tinted glasses, sort of, you know, things that you enjoyed in your youth aren't always as good when you look at them as an adult. And, you know,
kind of.
I think like there's somewhat truth to that, but I think not necessarily a better interpretation, because I don't think that's incorrect, but I think a different interpretation has something to do with being a child and feeling like you have all of the entire world at your feet, right? You have an infinite number of paths in front of you, and because of that, I think there's a lot more like creativity and imagination, and you know, there's more possibilities. And as you go into adulthood and you start choosing the paths you want to go down, there's less and less of them. And so, and you know, this sort of relates to the transness of it too, where, you know, when you're older, it feels like there's less opportunity for magic, I guess. I don't know. That thought isn't really fully formed, because
I understand though.
Yeah, right. But I think there's something there. I don't know.
Yeah, it's the like fucking in like Tinkerbell or whatever, where like, you know, children can see fairies, but then adults can't. You know, but it's like I've also seen the difference between 90s pink opaque versus streaming pink opaque be interpreted as like being embarrassed of how much something affected you as a child.
Yeah.
Especially when it's like being embarrassed that something shaped your like perception of self.
Right.
And then going back and being like, oh, was it ever that deep, or was I just latching on to something?
Right.
Because I needed something to latch onto.
Was I just projecting onto something that wasn't there?
Yeah. Very
Fantasy High junior year coded, I will say.
Yes.
What? Oh my god!
Who said that?
I'll talk about it in a week. In 1 week, we'll have more thoughts on that.
Yes.
Well, let's continue with the summary of the plot here, shall we? I think we've taken a good chunk of detour. We'll continue.
Yes.
So now it's been revealed that Owen is Isabel, and then the second musical performance starts after that, which is the first song that they play is called Claw Machine. I know that because I've been listening to the soundtrack, and it's the last track. The one that is first is Claw Machine. That's like the slow one, and then afterwards, the second song is called Psychic Wound, by Woman King, and it is a way different vibe. You know,
Yeah.
They are screaming, shouting at the top of their lungs. The lyric is, I feel it like a psychic wound. Help me, I'm still chained to you. Something, I feel it like a psychic wound. And then that gets repeated. And, you know, another example of the different elements of the movie converging to tell the same story in multiple different ways. Maybe we're getting a little deep here, but when I was in my deepest depression, I was, you know, incredibly distant and isolated from people, but I still constantly felt like I was crying out for help and no one was just hearing me. And even if they were, they didn't necessarily know how to help. And I think that is a feeling that this song choice captures very well.
It's I think the whole thing with Owen is very like needing help, like really desperately needing help and wanting help, but not wanting to receive it.
Right.
To just have it be done.
You want someone to force you to move forward in your life, because you know, there's you feel like you don't have any control.
Yeah. Which is very and feel free to cut this out because I think I'm going to say it in a clumsy way, but it's a very like egg thing to be like, I I desperately, desperately want and need this help, but no, don't tell me that you know what I need, but I need it really bad, but don't come near me,
Right. That, like, that's the thing, unfortunately, right? As the next part of the plot will prove, you can it's an old adage for a reason. You can lead a horse to water, but you can't force them to drink. Similarly,
Exactly.
you can communicate to people, like queer people, like, hey, I think I can kind of see what you're going through. I recognize a lot of it in myself.
Mhm.
Maybe let me give you some advice. Here's what I think would help. And you can do that all you want, but unfortunately, it's up to them to actually, self actualize and make that decision. Um,
Yeah, which is very, not to talk about trans discourse in this sacred video,
no, go
but
for it.
it, like, yeah, there's been this whole shit with the egg prime directive recently, where maybe not recently, I don't know, I'm not tapped in because why would I be?
Right.
But
I have
where,
better
like,
things to do.
I have better things to do, I love myself.
Right.
um but it's people being like, if you think that somebody might be trans, don't tell them.
Mm.
um which is like, I don't know, it's complicated. I think that if Owen had been egg prime directive, he would have died in the multiplex. you
Yeah.
know I think if nobody told him that he had to look inside himself, he would have had an asthma attack and died.
Right.
Like,
There's that's a really interesting thought, because I can understand from an emotional place where that comes from, right? You don't want you don't like people telling you what you are.
yeah.
At least I hate when that happens.
Mhm.
And but sometimes you need to do things that people don't like for their benefit. I am a
Yeah.
firm believer that being mean can be a kindness a lot of the time. And
Mhm.
not that telling someone they're trans is being mean, but like,
Mhm. But it can be something that they don't want to hear.
right, exactly. And maybe they wouldn't know otherwise
Yeah.
if you don't, because you hear it from queer people all the time about how their egg cracking moment, whether it's about gender or sexuality or whatever, is,
Mhm.
finally learning a word. Like,
Yeah.
oh, there is a term for the thing that I'm feeling that I've always known, but haven't really been able to put into words. And once you have that vocabulary, it allows you to self actualize.
Mhm.
And so I do think it's an interesting discussion. I think there's many
Yeah.
layers to it.
It's one of those things where it's like, people be talking so definitively. I don't know, man. I think it depends.
Yeah.
Like,
Maybe we take the discussion off of Twitter and into phone calls with your friends. Maybe we
this,
do that.
this.
Um so what happens next is Maddie tells Owen to meet her at the school, which is Void High School, by the way, which is VHS, and I thought that was very funny when I realized that
Yeah.
on round 3 of watching it, I finally put VHS together. Also, side note, the signs in the school are so stupid and poorly designed, and I love them.
They're really, really good.
And
It
I was gonna say that's another thing that points to the like dreamlike reality of the quote unquote real world, is like
Yeah.
a huge like thing, like a colored rectangle on the wall that just says like courage in like
Yeah.
the worst, like most random place, like not centralized, not big, teeny tiny, and like off to the left, like up here.
Yeah.
um but so Maddie go invites Owen to meet her at the school, and then we get this whole long monologue. I'm not gonna try and describe the whole thing, but it boils down to The way that Maddie escaped the Midnight Realm and, returned to real life was having someone bury her alive, and basically, I think she calls it returning to the earth.
Mm.
And something something. She gets closer and closer to death, and then she leaves her body, and returns to her life as Tara, and then comes back so that she can save Isabel. And it's really unnerving, this monologue, but it's so good. At one point, when she describes going back into the Midnight Realm, like drinking the Luna juice, she lies down on the floor like this and just closes her eyes and talks, giving the rest of the monologue like completely like stone-faced. It's so good.
It's so good.
If Lundy Payne didn't deserve awards for anything else, they deserve it for that monologue.
Yeah, exactly.
So then Maddie's like, hey, let's go out behind the football field and we're going to bury ourselves so that we can go back to real life.
Mm-hmm.
And Owen's like, and they're walking behind each other. It mirrors the shot of Owen in the dress walking down the football field with the axe that I mentioned earlier. And then right as they get to the 50-yard line, Owen pushes Maddie over and then runs away.
Mm-hmm.
And we never see Maddie again. That is the last time we see that character. What are your how do you take that? We sort of talked about like letting the egg prime directive or whatever, but what do you think about Owen saying, I think the line is, I expected her to like come to my house and like drag me out of the door, but I never saw her again.
It's very much the like, I desperately need help, but no, don't come near me. Just kidding, come near me. No, go away. It's he's expecting the push and pull more so that it can be like, eventually I was worn down into doing it.
Right.
And instead, Maddie is like, okay, well, I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna save my own life.
Right.
And I'm not gonna let both of us drown.
Right. It is. Oof. It's rough.
It's rough.
Yeah, this is really where the movie starts going from like sort of like sad to like really dark.
Deeply upsetting.
And deeply upsetting, yeah. So after this, we get another time skip. We hear that Owen now works at the Fun Center, which is basically this like Chuck E. Cheese style like arcade birthday party place with, it's just like designed to be distraction. Like it's like constant flashing lights and noises, basically. Look over here, look over there, blah 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 blah. And we hear about Owen's family. He has a family and children, and he loves them more than anything. We never see them in the movie, by the way. We only get that one line about them, and then they're never brought up again.
There's the one line about them, and you're probably about to talk about this, sorry. There's the one line about them while Owen is like, I got a new flat screen TV to upgrade because I'm an adult now and I have a family. Right. And it's an LG, so it says LG Life's Good.
Life's Good.
And then there's a prolonged like moment of him dragging the box into the house.
Yeah.
Like ball and chain style, like being weighed down by the expectation for your life to be good because you have a family.
Right. And then that kind of goes back to, the American flags from earlier, that, that expectation of, I'm going to find a life, I'm going to have children, I'm going to upgrade to a plasma screen TV and leave behind the things that brought me joy because that's what is expected of me in this
Yeah.
culture. And at this point, I believe Owen should be somewhere in his 40s, if I did my math during the movie correctly, because
Mm.
he starts in seventh grade, which is like what, 12?
Yeah, like 13-ish.
And then we get a 2 year time skip, then an 8 year time skip, then a 10 year time skip, or a
Mhm.
20 year time skip. Um, so it's like 30s to 40s, and he
Mhm.
looks fucking terrible. Like,
Yeah, it's I expected the time skip to be more because we see him like visibly graying and like exhausted, and then there's like the his coworker comes back and he looks about the same, you
right.
know. um
And like
yeah.
the like part of the way, one of the things that makes this part of the movie so uncomfortable is
Mm.
is the way they either boost his breathing or just like really made it a point to make it audible, because
Mm.
he has asthma. uh the whole movie they mentioned an inhaler at the beginning, but
Mm.
at this point he is constantly wheezing and like on the verge of an asthma attack.
Yeah,
um
just keeps it in his hand because he always needs it.
right. And his lips are like really cracked and
Mm.
dry, and there's a lot of close-ups where you can see it, the like parts flaking off. It's just, ugh.
Mm.
He looks awful in a way that he shouldn't at this point in his life.
Yeah.
um and there is a scene at the fun center where they're singing happy birthday. It's very manic and upsetting. A lot of,
Mm.
I feel like we say this about all the scenes in that we talked about, but it is deeply upsetting just
Mm.
how much energy this guy has.
Yeah.
um and then Owen interrupts it by screaming for help. He
Mm.
says, "I'm dying," and then he screams out for his mommy,
Yeah.
which is just, oh, so.
Yeah.
And when he does this, all the other like NPCs basically freeze in place. The system, or the Midnight Realm or whatever, doesn't know how to react, and so everything just stops until he resets himself and goes back to apologizing.
Yeah.
Um, do you have any thoughts on? I feel like I've been monologuing for a while.
You're
Do you have
so
anything
okay.
you want to say about anything that I've talked about?
Yeah, I mean, I guess this is jumping ahead a little bit. Um but after the screaming for help, it
Mm-hmm.
cuts to Owen in the bathroom. And his coworker is like calling from outside to check if he's okay, and Owen is like, "Yeah." And then the coworker's like assumedly goes away. And he takes his shirt off, stands up in front of the mirror in the bathroom, and has a box cutter, because the first scene that we see of this older Owen is him cutting open boxes in the back. So he has
Right.
a box cutter, and he cuts open his chest like earlier in the movie when he talks about having this like empty feeling in his chest, but he's afraid to look in. And he cuts himself open and he sees like TV static, and it's bright, and he's like smiling in a kind of manic way. And it's also deeply upsetting.
Right.
um, but very, very good. And then he cleans himself up and he goes out and he starts apologizing to people for the breakdown. And he's like, I'm sorry, it's this new meditation I'm trying.
Yeah.
Um which is a very funny line, but it does make me very upset.
It's just a new medication. It's just,
Yeah.
don't worry about it.
Yeah.
It's really funny.
Um,
And then that's the end of the movie.
yeah.
It cuts to the credits there.
Yeah. Which is, the pacing in this movie is really interesting and really good, but that ending, like, it cut, and then the credits came up, and I looked at my friend, and I was like, well, that can't be it.
Right?
But it also, if it went on any further, it would be crazy.
Right.
Like, it's, you don't need to see it, like, fully resolved.
Right. The point isn't, the point isn't, we need to know whether Owen makes this choice or not. It's more about leaving you with that possibility and being like, what do you think? Like, is it too late? Is it not? Like, it's up to the viewer. We'll talk about that, obviously. But I did want to go back, because I think the quote you're talking about from earlier in the movie, I wrote it down. This might not be exact, but when Maddie and Owen are having a conversation on the bleachers, and Maddie looks so good. I am obsessed with her hair and her makeup in this scene specifically. But Maddie asks if Owen likes boys or girls, and then he says, I think I like TV shows. And then then Owen says, when I think about that stuff, it feels like someone took a shovel and dug out my insides. And I know there's nothing there, but I'm too afraid to open myself up and check. I know something's wrong with me. Even my parents realize it, even if they don't say anything. Oof. Oof. But yeah, that I just want, because I think that line is really good, and I wanted to shout it out specifically. Also, that scene in the bathroom with the box cutter, I think, is really interesting because, and it goes back to the way that they are that Maddie, at least, leaves the Midnight Realm by burying herself alive. There is a lot of bodily trauma involved with trans stories, and, cutting open the chest specifically, I think, was an intentional choice, because the chest is, that's where the tits are. That's where the girls are. And that's like a major secondary sex characteristic. One of the first things that comes to mind, I think, when talking about transitioning is, for trans men, it's top surgery. And with trans women, it's, starting estrogen and either, trying to grow boobs or getting a boob job to, as gender affirming care. So I think the choice of cutting into the chest is very intentional.
Yeah.
And I want to have this conversation too with you, because when I saw it with my trans friend who is in the process of medically transitioning, and I'm not interested in medically transitioning, at least at this point. But I mentioned something about how there is something very physically traumatic with the process of transition, right? Even if you just look at it from like a purely objective standpoint, right? You're having your body cut open and, parts removed or added in. And ultimately it is supposed to serve yourself, right? It's a good thing that this happens, but that, like, I don't know, somewhat violent process, physically traumatizing process, is part of that process at the core. I don't know, what are your thoughts on that? How, like, if we're supposed to see this as a metaphor for transition, what does burying yourself alive and, basically dying in the Midnight Realm, what is that supposed to say about transness, etc.? The floor is yours.
Yeah. Well, I think that the dying in one world to be alive in another is, you know, like a very literal like rebirth thing, which is always a thing that comes up when talking about transness.
Right.
I think the thing in TV Glow with this like metaphorical transitioning being like literal like self-mutilation
Mm-hmm.
is like, first of all, body horror is incredibly transgender,
Right.
you know, always has been, always will be. It's sort of in like a reclamation sense, I think, because I feel like surgery is always like traumatic
Right.
because, you know, you're getting cut open and then you have to heal from getting cut open,
Mm-hmm.
which it takes a long time and it hurts.
Right.
But I don't know, I see it in this movie as a very like transition as an act of creation,
Mm.
transition as an act of destruction of one version of yourself so that you can be another version.
Right.
It's complicated, it's always very nuanced.
Right.
But I think that this movie specifically, it's a like, you do it because it's the only way,
Right.
you know.
It's
There's
either die or put yourself through this so that you can live.
yeah, it's kill or be killed, you
Yeah.
know. Yeah.
I do think that's an excellent point about, you know, like death and rebirth, you know.
Mm.
Going back to tarot, you know, but also like in general, you know, the death card in tarot readings can literally mean like someone dying, but in a more general sense it's about, you know, the ending of one thing, you know,
And the beginning
possibly
of another.
possibly
Yeah.
so that something else can begin. And you know, sometimes things do need to end. You can't live as yourself while you're still trying to hold on to the fake false version that you were living,
Yeah.
right? And like you said, it's like a pretty standard theme in trans stories especially, but also I think in, you know, more broadly queer stuff. We talked about how right, like Doyleist versus Watsonian. We've explained all the Watsonian reasons of what is happening in the plot of the movie, and now I want to talk about sort of the Doyleist. What is this ending supposed to tell us? Is it, you know, we mentioned this a little bit earlier, some trans people interpret this as it's this cautionary tale of the dangers of waiting, right?
Mm-hmm.
They see it as Owen has missed his opportunity to transition and is now SOL, shit out of luck. I personally think that they may be projecting a little bit of their own insecurities onto the movie. I'm not like,
Who said that?
oh my god, who said that? You know, and I'm not trying to like tell you the way that you're living your life or what you're feeling, but you know, maybe consider that some of these feelings might be coming from somewhere else, right? I don't know. What are your thoughts?
Not only do I not think that it's like oh, Owen's too late, I sort of deeply resent the notion that
Right.
Owen is too late. It's I don't know. I think that a way to interpret the events of the movie in just sort of like a, you know, what if it wasn't like a surreal horror movie and what if it was just literal events happening in real life?
Right.
It's someone being told that they can do DIY basically. and they're too fucking scared to do it. And they keep pushing away opportunities to transition because they're too scared. So the person who is telling them that they can transition gives up essentially and is like, okay, I'm going to do it because I want to live.
Right.
And it's Owen having this realization later in life, like, I need to do it and it needs to happen right now. It's not a, man, I should have done it years and years ago. And like, maybe he should have, because I think that he would be a lot happier if he did it years and years ago. But the whole thing is like, you can always do it.
Right.
You can always take that chance. Just because you missed the chance before doesn't mean you can't in the future.
Right. And in that final scene, right, he's still like apologizing to the people, but he's leaving the fun center. He's on his way out the door, basically. And, you know, I think that is an indicator that he is making the decision to exit this reality. Yeah. And I also, right, you mentioned that you resent the idea that it is that Owen is too late. And I would broaden that to say that I resent the idea that it's ever even possible to transition too late. Right. Yeah. And I have seen, I haven't like read a lot of reviews, but basically I saw one tweet that said that was talking about how the reason they interpreted the end of the movie that way is because they personally felt like they transitioned too late and basically sort of tried it and then it was hard. You know, being trans is deeply difficult, just existing in society. It's Trixie Mattel says this, it's not gay people that make being gay hard, it's straight people. Similarly, it's not trans people themselves that make their lives harder. It's cis people and the system around them that, you know, is constantly pushing back and demoralizing. And then, you know, it leads to, you know, fuck it. Maybe I'm non-binary or have pronouns, but I have a job right now, so I'm not really thinking about all that. You know? And that is definitely a very real lived experience, and I don't want to discredit that in any way. However, it's a little sad, right? You should, I think, just in general, you should always want more for yourself. Not even necessarily, like, more physically, but, like, you should want to be happy and live as your full self no matter what the obstacles are. You should always want that, and to give up on that idea is sad to me. And I think this movie is trying to warn people to not do that, and you know, and to say that even, you know, I said this earlier, as long as you are still breathing, there's still time. You know, even 1 second of living as your true self is better than none at all.
Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah, it got a little deep there. Do you have any other thoughts on this ending, on different interpretations of the ending?
Not really. I mean, I have some thoughts on, like, how literally people take the plot of this movie, and I think that it just doesn't matter if it's literal.
Yeah.
You know? It's not for that. I don't think that like horror like this is ever supposed to be that literal. Right. You know?
It's
or like probably in general, except for like straight up slashers.
Right.
You know?
Especially with horror, the quote unquote monster is always something else. I think this is something I heard in a Lindsay Ellis video, maybe, right? It's the idea, like, you know, the aliens in, this is a weird pull, but the aliens in Independence Day aren't actually aliens. The aliens are 9/11, right? The aliens are terrorists. you know,
Yeah.
in the 50s, you know, George Orwell, uh, um, um, War of the Worlds, I believe.
Yeah.
Or no, is that H.G. Wells? I don't know. I mix those two up.
Orson Welles did the radio play. H.G. Wells wrote the book.
Gotcha, right? But the idea is they're not the aliens in that aren't really aliens. They're communists, right? Invasion of the Body Snatchers, same thing. And in that way, I think the monster of this movie, even though there isn't one, I think is gender dysphoria. That is the central theme of it. And you know, we can talk about how in the season 6 premiere of Buffy the Vampire Slayer, Buffy is resurrected by her friends, and so that personally, that's why I think Owen Isabel gets revived and lives, and they go on to make season 6 or whatever. But that's, again, ultimately that's not the point. The point of this movie, I think, is what you take away from it and having these types of conversations. Having said that, I am so glad that you agreed to do this. We talked for almost 2 full hours about this movie.
Well, some of it will have to get cut
some of
because
it will
I
have to get
waffled a lot, but it's fine.
I'll definitely have to cut out some silence and maybe rearrange some parts. But I think we made a great video. Like I have at the end of all of my videos as of late, I'm going to plug a couple of GoFundMes in the description for people in Palestine and Congo and Sudan. Please check those out and donate to those if you can. If you are frustrated by world events and the genocides happening in those areas, this is a way for you to actually make a tangible difference in a person's life. Mutual aid is always good because it always directly benefits at least one person. B, is there anything you'd like to plug here at the end of the video?
Yeah, I'll just plug my socials and then you can find anything else that I do on there. I did talk about my podcast Tabletop Book Club a little bit at the top. That is on wherever you do podcasts. It's very fun. My Twitter is Booth Skeletons, Booth like a diner, skeletons like what's in your body. And then anywhere else you would need to find me, I'm at B. Alexander.
You can follow me pretty much anywhere on the internet at Andrew D. That is the at symbol, the word at Andrew D. And then, yes, I did steal it from Nathan Yaffe, in case anyone was wondering. You can see, I don't know if you can actually see it, but I have my Drawfee 1 year independent poster right there. You can also, if you're a Dimension 20 fan, this is going up on the podcast feed as a bonus episode for Pride Month. But if you're just watching this video on my YouTube channel, you can listen to my podcast, The Complicated Women Podcast, which is a show dedicated to discussing the complex women of Dimension 20. We haven't planned anything specific yet, but I do plan on having you be on the pod at some point in the future. If you want to listen to that, you can go to complicatedwomenpod.card.co for links to the show, both the YouTube channel, the Spotify page, and an RSS feed link, so you can add the show to your podcast app of choice. That is all that I had. B, thank you so much for being here. It was a pleasure. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'm gonna go put on Buffy the Vampire Slayer and stick my head through the TV. See you later.
Bye.